when a lonely girl's imaginary friends turned frighteningly real. A young family's dream becomes a nightmare. Attacked by entities from beyond the grave, they find themselves helpless within their own home. As the violence escalates, they try in desperation to fight back and understand what is happening around them. Their search for answers leads to a scientist who studies the paranormal and a medium who claims to see the dead. The family soon discovers there is no place to hide.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is the first show of October, and it's episode 59.
Yeah, another haunting episode.
Yeah, we thought we hadn't done one in a while, so, you know.
No, it was about time we had to get back to that.
And like I said, I kind of wanted to use October to kind of do some spooky stuff and ghost stories.
Yeah.
And, you know.
Yeah, Spooky Empires at the end of the month.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
And we're going to be there. It's the 27th, 28th, and 29th. And we're actually going to be hosting the Sick and Twisted panel on Friday night at 9 p.m.
Yeah. And today's episode's about Mr. Gordy.
Yes.
Remember Mr. Gordy?
The very famous, and it was actually not just a haunting episode, it was also on Unsolved Mysteries, actually. I think that's how it started out. And it was also the basis for a Hollywood horror film, Haunting in Connecticut 2, Ghosts of Georgia.
Right,
which,
yeah.
You know, whatever.
A lot of people don't know it, but a haunting actually started off as like two of these feature-length kind of pilots. First one was Haunting in Georgia, and the other one was Haunting in Connecticut. And that gave birth to a haunting as a series. And I thought we had those on our haunting compilations. And they weren't there. We actually had to go online to find them. I don't think they sell those two.
Well, they might, but I couldn't find them. I mean, they weren't on YouTube. We had to watch them somewhere else.
Yeah, if you get season 1 of a haunting,
I thought they were part
disc,
of the collection, but they're not.
Yeah, because I remembered them and I said, they must be on our season 1 discs, and they weren't there. But they're good. They're two really good episodes.
Yeah. Okay, so before we get into that, we have to do a bunch of shout-outs. My newest book, The Faceless Villain, which is a true crime compilation of unsolved murders from 1900 to 1959, first in the 3-volume series, will be out very, very soon. Like I said, the print version is done. The ebook version is done. I'm just recording the audiobook version. So the print and the ebook will be up first, and then probably the audiobook will follow up. And if you're going to want a free audiobook, because they usually give me 25 free codes to send to people who promise to write a review for the audiobook, then when the book comes out, let me know. It'll probably be like 3 weeks from now, so don't get excited, but you know what I mean. So so just let me know when you...
Patrons will get first dibs on the free stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of Patreon, we have 3 new patrons this week, Michael, Joni, and Arif. Thank you very much.
Yep, welcome aboard.
And we also had a PayPal donation from one of our YouTube listeners, Dean. Thank you very much. Thanks,
Dean.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks,
and,
Dean.
And if you would like to do our Patreon as, you know, a monthly donation or whatever, just go to our Patreon page, which is 13 O'Clock Podcast. Or if you would like to make a one-time donation, if that's more how you roll, then you can go to our blog, which is 13o'clockpodcast.com/WordPress, something like that. I always forget. And there's a little link on the side that says donate to PayPal, so you can just click on that.
Yeah, some people don't like Patreon. So
which is fair enough. So we have another option there. If you'd like to support the show and don't want to get involved in Patreon, then you can just do a one-time PayPal donation. That's totally fine and much appreciated. And we also had our first successful Patreon Google Hangout this past weekend. We had it on September 30th.
Yeah, we met Paul.
And we met Paul, one of our UK listeners, so that was very awesome. We kind of talked his ear off. I hope we didn't bore him to death.
Yeah, my head was killing me because I came down with a flu. Some kind of weird 24-hour flu that I had on it.
Yeah, at first I thought I was going to have to do the Hangout by myself, but then Tom sucked it up. And
my eyeballs were killing me.
and came in and helped me out. Yeah. So that's how that went. And let's see, the only other shout out I have to make. Oh, okay. So remember last week, I think I mentioned this last week, for our Halloween episode, we wanted to do reader ghost stories. they don't necessarily have to be ghost stories. They should be reader creepy stories, like something true and creepy that happened to you or someone you know. And I've only got one so far, and it's kind of short. So if anybody wants to hear their true creepy story read or summarized on our special Halloween episode, then drop me an email at gravecake@gmail.com. I'll put that in the show description. If we have enough, or, the best ones or whatever, we'll put them on the show, and it should be kind of fun, I hope.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. Now, let's get to a haunting. Like I said, we realized because we've been doing a lot of
listener requests,
because we've been doing a lot of listener suggestions, we realized that we hadn't actually done a haunting episode or review in a long time.
Right.
And even though we've done like a lot of our favorite ones, like Raccoon Man and all those other fun ones.
Yeah, somebody even mentioned the raccoon on
Yes, thank you for the shout out on Twitter.
Yeah.
Hashtag where's that raccoon?
Yeah.
Where is that raccoon?
That really did crack me up. So thanks for that. It was very cute. It was like a drawing of a raccoon that said "You'll never find me" on it.
It's funny.
So yeah, that was cool. But we decided to do this one, which actually is a pretty famous case, particularly in Georgia and in the United States. And like I said, it's had like lots of adaptations. Now, this is generally called the Wyrick haunting because that's the last name of the family that it involved. Or a lot of people know it because of Mr. Gordy.
Yeah, it also involves a pretty famous parapsychologist.
Yes, that's right.
Which kind of adds some credibility to the case. It's a pretty credible story, I think, as far as haunting episodes go.
Yeah.
It's one of their best ones.
And I believe there was even a book about the case. I'm not sure who wrote it, but I think it was called The Veil. Mm-hmm. And it was about Heidi Wyrick, who was the kid that originally started seeing the ghosts at the beginning of the story. But if you see the episode, as Tom was talking about before, when a haunting started, it actually didn't start out as a series per se. It actually started out as two-hour specials that were just like one-offs. And one of them was The Haunting in Connecticut, which was about the Snedeker family. Yeah. And they kind of, what they did, Paranormal Witness, they made a movie about that shit and all this, and I'm not even going to go into that because I think that might be, I think that story kind of was probably largely bullshit.
Which story? Well, hold on.
The Snedeker one.
Oh, Snedeker case, yeah.
It's very Amityville.
Pretty weird. We grew up with that case. We were hearing them
because I remember seeing them on like Geraldo and Sally Jesse Raphael and all that back in the day.
It was an intriguing case. It'd be interesting to get down to the bottom of it.
Yeah. That was the one, if you don't remember, that was the one that was set in the old funeral home.
Right.
And there was supposedly all kind of funeral home accoutrement, like left in the basement and all this other shit. Yeah,
phantom butt horkings as you were running down the road. Remember that?
They did not mention that on the episode,
She got mad on a talk show and mentioned that.
Yeah.
Yelled it out at the audience that it was raping her anally as she was running down the road, an invisible force.
That's right.
She only said it once.
Which, if that was happening, I'm sorry, but it's just such a funny mental image.
And how do you put that in a movie? How do you illustrate that?
Oh, I can think of how. But like I said, it wouldn't be scary anymore. It would just be hilarious. Yeah. Because you can't make that scary.
No, but I remember her saying it.
Being butt-horked by the invisible man as you're running down the street in a nightgown.
People are like, what the hell's butt-horked? It's a long story. It had to do with me and my friends playing a video game called Rastan at 7-Eleven back in like 1986. And when Rastan was kind of like Conan, when you'd fall on spikes and you'd go, the spikes look like it went up his ass. It's a long story.
So he would make it sound...
Me and my friends invented that term, butt horkage.
Because it sounded like the noise he was making when that thing went up his ass.
Ridiculous. We're fucking ridiculous.
So that's how we say we say butt horking. But so the Snedeker case, I don't know. But the other original haunting documentary, the 2-hour documentary, was less bullshitty, I think, and it was based on the Wyrick case and the case of Mr. Gordy. Now, I guess these two standalone shows were so successful, because I think it was the Discovery Channel at the time, were so successful that they decided to make a whole series out of it. Yeah. And obviously you know how that went, because that shit's still on, isn't it?
Yeah, those 2 pilot episodes actually really got my attention when they came out. I was like, man, these are really good.
Yeah.
And then they came out with a series, and the series was launched on the back of those 2 pilots, and everybody knows what the first couple seasons of The Haunting I thought was the best.
Yeah, because it didn't go over the top. Crazy.
Yeah, it started to get a little over the top, and it started to kind of come across as that they were going to take any case they could get their hands on, and make it the fantastic next best case. And there's always a problem with that. Yeah,
I think they started feeling like they had to
top the
last one. Right. So it's like they have to make it crazy. So now like every single one is flying demons and werewolves.
Not to say that those cases are false. It's just that, some of them are
exaggerated,
better.
Probably.
Some of the cases are better than others, and let's admit to that some of the cases are better than others.
Yeah. The interesting thing about the original, and I don't remember the original Snedeker documentary, but the interesting thing about this one was that, how later on A Haunting, they did actor reenactments, right?
Yeah.
Well, this one, they did reenactments, but they used the actual people.
Yeah, and let me mention something before I forget. Those first 2 pilots are not available on YouTube, and evidently are not available on CD as far as we know, but they're on Daily Motion. If you want to find them.
That's where I saw
That's where we
them.
found them, right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's in 2 parts.
Right.
Somebody put it up, but
yeah. What is it? You had to Google something like
I put A Haunting in Georgia 2009,
and it came up.
Yeah.
Right. In 2 pieces.
Because that's why. Because I went and got screenshots and stuff like that. Because I thought we had it on.
Yeah, and they're actually pretty good copies.
Yeah.
Good old Daily Motion.
But yeah, like I said, the interesting thing is they still do the reenactments of all the stuff that happened, but they use the actual people.
Yeah, that was pretty creative.
Like, yeah, they didn't use... I think the only one, obviously, that they had to use actors for was, like, the kids, because now the kids are grown and stuff like that. So, for the little kid that played Heidi, that wasn't the actual kid, because the girl was a teenager when they filmed it. Okay, here's what happened in the case. Now, the family is Lisa and Andy Wyrick. And at the time that they moved to this little house in Ellerslie, something like that, Georgia, they had a daughter named Heidi. Now, it's weird because like the different things say different. She was either 3 or 5. She was, a little girl. It was 88 or 89 that they moved to this house. Now, the house, some sites say, it was mysteriously abandoned by the former owners. Mm-hmm. But then other sites say, it was just abandoned because the people didn't pay their mortgage or whatever. They just, they couldn't afford it anymore and they just took off and left it. And when they left it, it was apparently in kind of bad shape.
Okay.
So I guess the Wyricks got it sort of cheap. Now, it was in a pretty rural area.
Right.
I've only been to Georgia a couple times, so I'm not really sure.
Georgia is rural.
Yeah. I mean, other than Atlanta and a couple of other cities in Savannah. But,
it's where The Walking Dead happens.
Yeah. It's Walking Dead country. They apparently bought this house for cheap and they got it renovated. Now, nothing weird happened during the renovation, apparently, and I don't really know how long that took. But they had lived there for a little while. And then their little girl, Heidi, started saying that she was seeing an old man that was coming to play with her.
Yeah.
Like, she would be out in the backyard messing around, and she would come back in for lunch or whatever, and your mom's like, hey, what were you doing out there? And she's like, oh, I'm playing with my friend.
Mr. Gordy.
Mr. Gordy. That's what she called him.
And in the episodes, it's really great how they do the kind of reenactment. They have this old guy. Yeah. He's kind of a friendly looking guy. Kind of looks like, my old principal or something, from high school. How you doing, Mrs. Heidi? Would you like to be on the swing with me and ride on my swing? kind of draws you in on the episode. Like, wow, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so Heidi, she described this man as like an older man with silver hair, with a black suit and shiny black shoes. Now, on the show, they showed him as bareheaded, but I think she said he had a tall hat on when she saw him. And she said that he would push her on the swing and that he was really nice and stuff like that. Obviously, the mom is like not down with this idea because she thinks this is an actual creepy old pedo that's lurking around the neighborhood. Like, hey, little girl, let me push you in the swing and let me play with your dolls.
She called her husband. And
she calls her husband and says, hey, there's some weirdo in our backyard pushing our little girl on the swing.
He comes running on back home in his truck and jumps right into his rifle cabinet, pulls out his .45, and he's searching the neighborhood for this guy.
Yeah, he's like running around in the yard with his gun and everything. I'm calling you
And of course, there's really strong Georgia accents involved,
Yeah, they're very, and like, I'm from the South, so I can.
Yeah. It's just kind of fun. You know how that man, he's asking her about my little girl.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what they said. No exaggeration. That's exactly what they sound like. So he's running around the house with his gun, and they can't find anything. Now, as the little girl keeps saying, oh, I'm playing with Mr. Gordy, I'm playing with Mr. Gordy, and sometimes the mom will hear the little girl, like, in her bedroom talking to somebody, and sometimes she'll be like, hey, can I have extra cookies, or can I have an extra sandwich and stuff, and she takes them in her room because they're for Mr. Gordy, right? Yeah. But then the mom goes in there, and she sees the little girl, and she's talking to nobody. She's talking to, like, an empty chair.
Yeah.
So for a while, as you would, you think, well, the kid's just lonely, and she has an imaginary friend named Mr. Gordy, right? And that's kind of how it stayed. I mean, I think the parents were kind of worried, but, everyone was like, oh, kids, they have imaginary friends. It's fine. Just don't worry about it. So they actually decided to humor the kid. Like, oh, okay, here's another cheese sandwich for Mr. Gordy, and how's Mr. Gordy doing today, and stuff like that. Now, there was also a day when the little girl was sitting in the living room and heard a knock on the door, and she went to answer it, and she says that there was a man standing there who had blood all over his shirt and a bandage around his hand.
Yeah, and she asked him, who are you? And he said, I'm Mr. Khan.
He said his name was Khan. Not Khan! Yeah. Not that kind of Khan. Not that Khan.
Boy, they butchered that. Okay. Poor Star Trek.
I know, but Khan, C-O-N. That's what he said his name was. Now, Heidi did not appear to be afraid of these dudes. I mean, she goes back inside, and the mom is like, so who is that knocking at the door? And she said, oh, it's a man with blood on his shirt, and he says his name is Khan. And mom's like, what? Yeah. And then she grabs a butcher knife and runs out there and looks around the house, and she doesn't see anything either. Right. So she's like, okay, that must be another imaginary person. Wow, my kid is kind of weird. Yeah. So this goes on for like a couple of years. And they just assume that the kid is seeing imaginary things. Right. They try to do things like, they get her a dog and stuff like that.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, so she won't be so lonely and things. Because I guess there wasn't, it was kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and there weren't a lot of other kids around for her to play with.
And this dog ends up freaking out at one point.
Yeah, that's later on, though. So they've been there for a couple of years. In the interim, Lisa, the mom, she had asked around the neighborhood and said, do you guys know anybody named Mr. Gordy or anything like that? And no one did. But then her sister, Joyce, buys the house next door to them. Now, this house was purchased from a woman she was an older woman, and she's on the haunting episode. And she was an older lady there, so I'm assuming she's probably dead by now. She said her parents had owned it and her grandparents had owned it. So her family had been living there for a really long time. Now, she happens to have an old deed from the house, and she shows it to Joyce. And Joyce sees the name James Gordy on the bottom of the deed.
Yeah, and she freaks out.
And she freaks the fuck out because she's heard, her niece talking about hanging out with Mr. Gordy, and she's like, what the fuck? Yeah. So she says to the lady that had owned the property, she's like, who's Mr. Gordy? And she said, he was a friend of the family. He was this nice old man. He was like a real estate agent or a real estate developer or something. Yeah. He owned this property and a bunch of other properties. She said he was the executor of my mother's will. Like, he took care of all her legal shit and everything like that. And he kind of took care of her when she was dying and stuff like that. And she's like, where is he now? She's like, he died in 1974. Yeah, he's been dead for a long time. So Joyce is like, holy shit, I have to go tell Lisa about this shit. Yeah. So she goes to her sister's house next door and says, check this out. She's like, that's a real guy, except he's dead.
Yeah, been dead since 74.
Yeah. Then it comes to, like, they take the little girl to see the guy's grave. It doesn't really, they said when they took her to the cemetery, she knew right where his grave was. Like, she went right to it.
She went right to it, and she can't read.
And she couldn't read, but because she was just little. But she knew that's whose grave it was.
They also ended up showing her a photograph.
Well, now, the first thing they did was the older lady that had owned the property, whose family had owned the property next door that Joyce bought, she brought over a whole shit ton of old photographs just to see if the little girl, Heidi, would recognize any of the people. Now, she's going through the pictures, and she picks out a group photo, and she points to one old man. She says, that's Khan.
Okay, yeah.
And he had his arms crossed. It was like an older guy. And the old lady said, that's my uncle. She's like, his name is actually Lon Batchelor. Okay. But she said that when he was a teenager, he got his hand caught in a cotton gin and it got cut off.
Right, so possibly explaining why he had blood on his shirt.
And a bandage on his hand when the little girl saw him.
Right.
So that was pretty freaky.
Yeah.
You know, so all this shit's been going on and they're like, okay, well, she
I thought there was a time where she actually identified
Well, yeah, but that was later on.
That was later? Okay.
That was later on. That was after the parapsychologist came and everything like that.
Okay. I'm getting ahead of the story.
Yeah.
You know how I get it.
I know. That's what you do. See, I have an outline and you just keep messing
no,
it
I'm
up.
gonna jump around.
Oh, and also, it should be noted that Lon, a.k.a. Khan, had died in 1957. So he had been dead for an even longer time. Now, I don't think that Heidi saw him a lot. I think they just mentioned on the show that she saw him
Just that one time, yeah.
Just that one time, but she might have seen him other times.
He came to the door.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of creepy.
That would be kind of creepy. But like I said, the little girl really didn't seem that upset. And they talked to her like she was a teenager when the haunting episode was made. And they talked to her later on about seeing the ghosts and everything. And they didn't seem to alarm her, she said, because I can tell if they're good or bad or whatever. So
Right, so I'm pretty sure that the audience now gets the drift. And if they haven't seen this episode, that this little girl can see ghosts.
Yeah.
Ghosts of the dead, of people that were associated in that area.
Right. But for a long time, she seemed to only see good ones. Then came 1993. And Lisa had another daughter named Jordan. She had a baby. And after the baby was born, then Heidi started to see another ghost. And this one was scary. Now, she said this one, she couldn't see who they were, but she said it was just like a black figure, like in a hooded coat. Like she said, she couldn't see their face. So it was just like a hood over it all the time. And she said this one, she felt was hostile.
Yeah.
And she said that, whenever she would see it, it would get really cold in the room and stuff like that.
And in the TV episode, evidently, based on what they're showing, she's seeing it in the daytime too.
Yeah. I mean, she like kept seeing it like all the time. But yeah, she would see it in her room. She would kind of see it all over the place. A couple weeks after Jordan was born, Heidi wakes up in the middle of the night and her face hurts. So she runs into her parents' room and is like, oh, something woke me up. My face hurts and I'm scared and stuff like that. And they look at her face and there's the telltale 3 scratch marks
It's weird.
on her face.
It's always 3, kind of like the lock on the door in Mammoth Mountain Poltergeist case.
It's
3 scratches.
Yeah, it always seems to be.
Maybe 4 is not as convenient. It's the minimum amount of scratches you need to make it look like a claw mark, I guess.
I guess so, because like I said, if you're going to make a claw mark, then you'd probably just like put your pinky and thumb, like tuck it into your
We have to look at scratch marks from cats and other kind of animals. Is it 3 or is it 4?
I don't know. Well, kitty, don't
it's
they
probably
have...
either.
Yeah. I guess
depending on how good
on...
the strike was.
Yeah.
Weird. Okay.
But so she has these little scratches on her face. Now, because, before they had kind of been used to her seeing the nice ghosts and everything like that, but this was kind of a new phenomena. So at first they just thought, well, she just scratched herself in her sleep and no big deal. But then 2 nights later, Andy, the dad, he wakes up and he has 3 scratch marks like on his side.
Yeah.
And they're supposedly really deep and he kept saying.
They burn, yeah.
Yeah, because he was saying on the show, what did he say? I can't
Burning like fire.
Yeah.
Fire.
Yeah.
It sure is burning, damn. He got southern about it,
Yeah. Well, you know how you do. So, yeah.
Give me that calamine lotion.
They still make that, don't they?
Spray some off on it.
I would not spray off on maybe Bactine.
Yeah.
I'm not going to spray any off on a
real redneck just
wound.
sprays off on it. You get burned, you're going to spray off on it. Hand me that off. Because that's the only thing you have in the truck.
No, yeah. I would have thought WD-40.
WD-40 works too.
Spray WD-40 on the fucking... When your arm comes off, just put WD-40. That'll solve it. Then put some duct tape on it.
Okay.
You know how you go. Yeah, we're fucking
around too much.
Now here's something that I found on a written, online description of the case that they actually did not put in the show. Now, evidently, Joyce's daughter, who was Lisa and Andy's niece, was over babysitting Jordan, the baby.
Yeah.
Now, apparently, she heard the baby choking in her room. So she runs in there to see, and she finds the baby with a ribbon knotted a bunch of times around the baby's neck, and the baby's suffocating.
Oh, that wasn't in the episode.
No, that wasn't in the episode, but I saw that in a later thing about the case.
Weird.
Maybe that was in the book. I don't know. Yeah, so she had to she had to cut this little ribbon off. Now the ribbon had come off of a teddy bear that was in the crib. But they said, there's no way that the baby could have got this ribbon off the teddy bear and then knotted, because they said it was knotted a bunch of times, like around the baby's neck. So they are attributing this to the scary, dark figure.
Right.
Now, Lisa and Andy are kind of saying, well, maybe we should move because this shit is getting serious and all this other kind of stuff. But after a while, they're like, this is our house. And if Heidi is seeing things and other people, and this shit is happening, maybe it'll happen to us wherever we go.
Right.
So maybe we should stay here and try to figure it out. So to that end, they would, and there's also, Lisa started to hear things also. Like she would be laying in her bed and she said she heard 2 gravelly voices like talking up near the ceiling. And she said she got the impression that they were talking about her, but she couldn't understand what they were saying.
Yeah.
So they started to feel like this was maybe a demonic presence, and I think they didn't really go into this much in the episode either, but on something else that I read about the case, they said actually the family fled from the house several times to like stay with relatives or stay at a hotel or whatever. So it wasn't just a case where actually they probably should have put in the episode because it's not like they didn't have time. It was 2 hours long.
It's kind of weird that she's laying in bed and she's hearing these gravelly voices talking about her. She can't really tell what it is, but from the ceiling. I kind of had that happen to me. A lot of people that knows my case, I had that happen to me. Heard a voice and I ran.
Yeah.
Maybe just because she was older and being female, maybe it has something to do with she just froze in bed, couldn't run anywhere. She was an adult,
it's like sometimes you're kind of like you don't want to move because you're afraid. What if I move and like some worse shit happens?
I move and I attract its attention.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you're trying to just like pretend I'm not here. I'm not here.
Right. Well, it was kind of that way when I was laying in bed when I heard their furniture kind of drag across the floor. Remember that first night there in that house? I just froze.
Well, yeah, because I think
froze like a damn bunny rabbit until I just passed out and fell asleep.
Most people would do.
Right.
I mean, I think that some people think that you have, it's fight or flight, like you're going to get up and run. But honestly, I think probably 99% of people, if they were in that situation, would freeze for a second because you'd be like, oh shit, what if something's in here? I don't want them to see me or I don't want, I think that's a more natural response.
First time it kind of happened to me at Mammoth, it was like, it's like I froze up in fear and I knew that something wasn't right.
Well, because because it'd be different if you thought that someone broke in and was going to murder you or something like that.
And then the next day I was kind of embarrassed or ashamed of my fear of it. Like, it must have been my imagination.
Yeah.
But it wasn't,
But like I said, that's, again, a very common thing to feel. Because you feel, especially like in the next day when it's, the sun's out and everything seems normal, you seem like, oh, well, it's easy to say, oh, well, I just imagined that.
Yeah.
And I'm stupid.
Because I look at the situation when I'm laying there in that telephone receiver, I hear it pick up and fall. Had that not happened to me and I heard somebody tell me that story, I'd be like, man, I'd have run out of there. But looking back on it, no, that's not what happened. You just kind of it's like a deer in the headlights. You're just like, wow.
Well, okay, check it out. Now, I don't have, and I know a lot of people have, night terrors and things like that. I don't usually have that. I don't usually even have bad nightmares, even though I write about horrible things. But I have had one instance of sleep paralysis in my entire life. And this is and I thought it was real.
Yeah.
This was when I lived by myself in an apartment. And I woke up and I saw a man standing in the door of my bedroom holding a bat, like a baseball bat that was poised. And even though for a few seconds I thought it was a real person, I didn't get up, I didn't scream, I didn't do anything. I just laid there and stared at it like, fuck.
Yeah. Froze,
You know what I mean? But then I realized, oh, okay, I'm dreaming or it's sleep paralysis or whatever.
I've had that happen too, where a dream and reality, well, you're seeing reality, but there's like a dream superimposed over the top of it.
That's kind of what this was.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell them
it looked
apart.
Real, though. I mean, it looked like a real man standing there. Like, I couldn't see his face or nothing, but, he looked like a man standing there. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a break right now, and when we get back, we will continue talking about the Wyrick haunting and Mr. Gordy, and we might get into the movie adaptation. I've only seen it once, and it wasn't that great, but we'll talk about it a little bit, too, because it was a lot different than the actual case. So we'll be back in just a few minutes. Hey, 13 O'Clock fans! Love the show but don't have an hour to spare? Check out our new list channel, 13 O'Clock in Minutes. All the fun, creepy topics of the main podcast, but in easy-to-swallow, bite-sized pieces. Links in the description. More videos to come soon.
Significant, because we are willing to put pen to paper and conclude at the end of the day that this house is very much haunted and will continue to be haunted for a very long time.
Okay, so we're back talking about this. Now, like I said, at this point it was getting really bad. Now, this they also did not mention on the show, but apparently Lisa and Andy began to feel like there were a lot of illnesses in their family that they attributed to this dark presence, or which they perceived as a demon. And they had to have a bunch of surgeries, and they just thought it was happening at an unusual rate. So they did attribute that to supernatural causes. And also, like you mentioned before, their dog was constantly freaking out and barking at things that weren't there. And
yeah,
stuff
one of
like
the witnesses said that dog was barking into the kitchen, and it was just beside itself.
That's what she said. She said it was beside itself.
Yeah,
she said it was showing all its teeth, and it was
and they were sitting there trying to figure out what the dog was barking at. They never could see anything.
Yeah.
And then later that dog ends up vanishing and never coming back.
Yeah, that's right. The dog ran away and never came back because they're like, fuck that house.
Now, I've come across that in several cases of dogs freaking out in poltergeist cases, barking at things that weren't there, chasing things that weren't there, and then vanishing. Yeah. The dog vanishes. Imagine an animal can't deal with that.
Well, yeah, it's like, what are they going to do?
Right.
I mean, it's funny because I make jokes about it, but like when our kitten will suddenly be running around and she'll suddenly stop and look up at the ceiling like really intently. Yeah. And I always tease her. I'm like, are you looking at ghosts? Are there ghosts up there?
Always made me wonder what it was that they were actually seeing. Are they just seeing like a ball of maybe infrared light? Or are they seeing an
That's
image?
what I mean. I've always been curious. I wish we could kind of like tap into their little brains and see if they're actually seeing anything, or
maybe they're just feeling something, feeling a presence. Kind of like, I felt a presence.
Yeah.
Maybe they're feeling a presence and feeling being watched from an area.
And then maybe they're looking and they don't see anything.
They don't see anything and it's
confusing
them. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
Because in my poltergeist case, everyone felt like you were being scrutinized from a certain direction.
Yeah.
But there was nothing there. So maybe that's all it is.
Yeah. That's probably pretty. I mean, if humans feel that, then I imagine animals probably feel that.
They might feel it even more.
Yeah. It might be more pronounced.
Right.
So at this point, they decided, well, we're going to have to do something about this. Now, to their credit, unlike a lot of the families that were on later episodes, they did not immediately go running to the church. They did later. But they went right to the top, pretty much. They went to Dr. William Roll, famous parapsychologist.
Yeah, you've written a lot about it.
If you read my book, The Unseen Hand, there is a bunch of cases that he investigated. That he is very he does not believe in ghosts. He believes that anything paranormal can be explained in a natural framework, even if it's nature that we don't understand yet, which is about the same kind of viewpoint that I have.
And I'm kind of a mixture.
Yeah. And the interesting thing, too, is that William Roll's books, case studies and things like that I read when I was a teenager, that's what gave me the idea to do The Unseen Hand, because I wanted to do like a throwback book kind of like that, because I felt like there weren't that many
I think there's a scientific explanation.
Yeah.
But I also believe that possibly the mind can survive, or the consciousness can survive death.
Yeah.
Because I've had out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences. And that may be perceived as a ghost.
Yeah.
But that's what a ghost, I guess you could say, is.
Right.
But I'm not saying that it's supernatural. That might actually be a natural phenomenon, some kind of a quantum consciousness or quantum soul theory, So I kind of put myself into a mixture category.
Yeah.
It's possible maybe someone can hold themselves together long enough to interact with the world and be perceived as a ghost. Could also be that perhaps the past could replay itself like a recording. I think they call it a residual.
Yeah.
haunting.
Or the stone tape theory, if you prefer, which was
Right.
named after a British TV movie.
Right. Or it could be that some people can just tap into the past and see the past.
Which
You know
is
what I mean?
actually when William Roll came to investigate. He interviewed all the family members. He did all your standard parapsychological things. He took readings all around the house. He was there like in and out for a very long time, him and his assistants. He came to the conclusion he did not think the family were making things up. He didn't think they were crazy or anything like that. He thought that it was probably a combination of, he did find some interesting, I don't think he found any unusual electromagnetic readings, but he found some very unusual like high ion readings or things of that nature.
So that ions can affect the right hemisphere.
Yeah.
And can cause visions.
Right. So he was thinking that maybe it was some kind of anomalous ion thing that was causing hallucinations, and or that Heidi was psychic, because he does believe that people have natural latent abilities and psychic powers and can tap into various things. Or that she was accessing the past somehow and reconstructing it in her mind. So he didn't believe that Mr. Gordy was an actual ghost who was still fiddling around in the present. He just believed that she was reconstructing an image of him from past things. Because it actually was Dr. Roll. He actually got them in touch with the TV show Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack. And they did a show about that. And that actually came out quite a long time before the haunting episode did.
I haven't seen that one. I'd like to see that one.
I don't think
now.
I've seen that one either. But he got them in touch, so they kind of, collaborated on that. Now, the Unsolved Mysteries show was able to locate a picture of Mr. Gordy. And this was when they took a picture of Mr. Gordy and they mixed it in with a whole bunch of other ones of dudes that looked like that.
Similar to Mr. Gordy, yeah.
And they showed it to Heidi, and she immediately said, "That's Mr. Gordy."
So she picked him up out of a lineup.
She picked him up out of a lineup, without even hesitating. After that, and after her identifying, the con Lon person, they probably thought she was somehow accessing past people in the area.
Yeah.
Like I said, she didn't feel like Mr. Gordy or anything. She always felt like Mr. Gordy was protecting her and was protecting her from the other spirits in the house and keeping them from doing worse things.
Right.
So, like I said, William Roll came back a bunch of times and studied it. And that's kind of, he just thought, well, Heidi is a psychic. Her mom, he also thought her mom, Lisa, had some psychic abilities, and that it kind of ran in the family.
Yeah, he wasn't sure whether or not it was something in the environment causing psychic phenomena in this family, or if it was something that was inherited genetically.
Yeah, he
wasn't sure.
Right, he kind of said it could be either thing.
Right. And maybe both.
Yeah, or both, could be. Now, after a while, I think that since the phenomena continued, Dr. Roll also put them in touch with a psychic. Wasn't her name Amy Adams or Amy something? It's a pretty black-haired
kind of the
girl with the
goth-looking
bangs.
girl.
It was a gothy-looking girl.
She ended up getting her own show.
Yeah.
I forgot what her name was.
I think it was Amy something. Like, I want to say Amy Adams, like the actress, because I was
Right.
like, oh, it's the same name as that actress. But, so she was on the show too, and she was playing herself in the reenactment, and then they were interviewing her. Now, evidently, William Roll sent the psychic to the house, and he said, now, you are not allowed to talk to the family beforehand. You are not allowed to go to the house beforehand. You have to go to the house when the family is not there, and you're not allowed to, research the area or anything like that, because he wanted her going in cold. So evidently she did.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she went into the house, and even though, the stuff she said was, kind of vague, but she did say that outside in the backyard, she felt a protector spirit, which they thought was Mr. Gordy. And inside, she felt something very hostile, like a faceless figure. So what she said kind of lined up with other things.
Man.
Now, I should say, too, that the ghost of a little girl was also seen in the house. This was apparently seen by Heidi. It was seen by Jordan, the younger sister, when she got a little bit older. And I believe that Lisa's sister Joyce also saw this little girl and heard her laughing.
Yeah.
And even though Joyce said she was creeped out by it, because she said the laugh sounded very creepy, and then she saw the little girl really quickly, but Heidi said that she had seen the little girl too, and that she wasn't afraid of the girl. Like, she didn't think the girl was going to hurt anything.
She also said she heard an older woman laughing outside the door of the bathroom while she was taking a shower.
Yeah, that happened later on.
Yeah.
So, like I said, this house fucking super haunted, evidently.
Either that or they're just psychic people and they're
that's, like I said, that's
picking up
kind
images
of what...
from the past and reactivating personalities.
Yeah.
Maybe quote unquote ghost is mostly just kind of imagine like a quantum level computer program that just stored in the hard drive. And it's not happening until you open that program.
Yeah.
And a psychic can open that program, and all of a sudden that ghost kind of comes alive and does a little demo.
Yeah.
Now the
little demo. I love that.
Now that person may not be aware. That ghost may not be a real ghost. It might just be an image from the past.
Yeah. That's kind of what I suspect.
And it might be interactive image, almost kind of like AI, but it's not there. It's not an intelligent being.
Yeah, like you can't ask it questions like in the present day and have it answer.
Because there are some people that have claimed to have gotten together and just consciously willed a ghost into existence of a person that never lived. And evidently it caused a haunting that fit the description of what they had imagined.
Well, and I think, I've mentioned this on a lot of my interviews that I did about some of my poltergeist books too, is that And you kind of think this too, that especially in poltergeist kind of cases, I think there's an element of almost like a feedback loop or like expectation causing things to behave in a particular way.
Like if you believe that you want to see the ghost of George Washington, you might get the ghost of George Washington, but that's not George Washington.
Yeah, that's not actually George. Hey, I just was crossing the Delaware and thought I'd drop by and say, hey, check out my wooden teeth.
For all we know, the spirit that drove George Washington may be reincarnated in a cat right now or something like that. You don't know.
Maybe our cat is George Washington. That would explain a lot.
You're just seeing kind of like a holographic or a representation of George Washington doing Washingtonly things.
Washingtonian
type stuff.
So they've had Dr. Roll there many, many times because they called him back a couple times because I think that even though he told them, oh, look, okay, it's either that you guys are psychic and or that there's this really high energy field or there's a really high ion field or something like that in your house that's causing hallucinations and causing other things of that nature. So the family kind of believed it, but didn't seem particularly comforted by that.
Right.
Because I think that they had Andy on there saying well, he seemed like a smart man, but I don't know if that's entirely all that was going on.
Yeah.
He said it like that.
Right, kind of.
So he thought that there was more to it. Also,
which I would tend to agree with the guy.
Maybe, because I'm sitting there going, well, if they did get all scratched up and stuff like that, maybe they could have been doing that themselves.
I'm telling you from personal experience, if you ever have to deal with a poltergeist, there is a feeling of presence. Yeah. There is the feeling of being watched. It's pretty strong. When that thing's really rolling, when a poltergeist outbreak is really going, when it's going strong, you're going to swear up and down that there's a damn person, an interactive person in that house. Maybe one that's not real friendly. Yeah. It's ominous and creepy. Very, very creepy.
And that's very commonly reported.
And you've seen it here.
Yeah.
And it can do things that are kind of creepy, but from what you've seen, there's nothing compared to the way it was.
Yeah, because what I saw was strange, but it didn't frighten me. I didn't feel like I was in danger. I didn't feel any sense of ominous.
And no sense of presence in any of the
No, I didn't feel a presence really. No. I was kind of creeped out after, but I was just but I don't think it was just because, I don't think it was because I felt a presence. I was just whoa, that was creepy.
When I was 13, you'd have the feeling of a presence.
Yeah.
And being watched from the ceiling.
I've only ever had that one time. It was at my grandmother's house and I was sitting at the table and I swear to God, I felt someone behind me. Yeah. Really, so much that I turned around, I'm who is that?
We used to feel it above us, up towards the ceiling near a corner. Like something's up there looking down on you. It's really bizarre. Very bizarre. And then you wonder, how does a person feel like they're being watched? By what mechanism do you feel like you're being watched? Nobody knows. But some of these people have done experiments, and they think it has something to do with quantum consciousness, where if you stare at a person's back of a person's head, they can feel it.
Most of the time, they can tell when someone's looking at them.
And evidently, women are better at it than men.
Yeah.
That somebody's watching them. Well, it's that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, nobody really knows how that happens. Nothing's coming out of your eyeballs touching that person. Yeah. So what is it?
That's what I mean. That's why I think some kind of mild latent psychic ability isn't that crazy, because I'm people do know when people are looking at them, even when you're not looking at them and shit like that.
Maybe it has to
It's just a heightened perception.
Maybe it's Heisenberg uncertainty principle. How does a subatomic particle know that it's being measured?
Yeah, similar kind of thing. Right. It's probably the same kind of thing.
Something with perception and mind.
Yeah. But so the thing is, even though, William Roll had been there and said, it's nothing to worry about, you guys are just psychic or it's a natural phenomena or whatever, nothing's going to hurt you. And then the psychic, the Amy person that came, she kind of said a similar thing. She's like, I do think that there are spirits here. Like, she thought they were surviving personalities. She thought Mr. Gordy was still there and Con was still there and things like that. But she said, no one's going to hurt you. You guys are just psychic, and you're just going to have to learn to deal with it because you guys have this gift and ability, and you're always going to see ghosts and things, and just kind of roll with it. However, the family didn't like it. So they eventually went to their church for help. And this was probably years later. And I mean, because they showed it some on the show, and Heidi was like a teenager. She was like 14 or 15. Now, I should note, too, that after the family were on Unsolved Mysteries, they didn't mention Unsolved Mysteries on the show. They said, a member of the press came out.
Okay.
But I think this was the Unsolved Mysteries. Maybe they weren't allowed for legal reasons to refer to that show or something. But so after the show about them came out on Unsolved Mysteries, Heidi was relentlessly bullied in the town because this was like a small town, right? And they said, so everybody just made fun of her, and, she started to...
They're getting jealous.
I guess.
She was on TV.
That bitch.
Yeah, that bitch on TV.
Why don't I get to be on TV? I'm prettier than her.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of how it was. So she got bullied a lot and stuff like that. And like I said, she still continued to see things much later into her life. They even showed her like showing the, that black figure, like she saw it standing on the porch, and then it walked through the wall and stuff like that. So they went to the church thinking that, well, it's demonic and we have to do something about it. So they had their preacher on there. I can't remember his name, but he was, I called him the preacher meatball because he was like a big, huge.
Yeah,
he
preacher meatball.
Yeah, because he looked like a big meatball or a snowman or something. He was just like a big round body with a little round head on top. And he had the patented Southern preacher voice. They must all go to the same place to like learn that shit. Because, they're just anointing them with oil, and it was all that kind of stuff.
You gotta put a little bit of falsetto in there. You gotta put a little vibrato.
That's exactly right.
Vibrato.
And he was like...
Because the Lord sees above it. Turn to chapter 4.
You missed your calling. That's what you should have done. You have the voice down pat. Yeah, because they like over-enunciate their T's.
You over-enunciate and you put vibrato into it.
Yeah.
And you try to...
So you always sound like you're just right on the verge of an emotional breakdown. You know what I mean? Like you just can't take it. You can't take it anymore. The Spirit's coming through you.
The power of the Lord's coming through you. And you have to be more Southern than the South itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how you have to do it.
Yeah, you have to Southern the fuck out of that. You have to
Southern the fuck out of it.
But yeah, so they go to the church, it's one of those kind of churches. They get anointed with oil and stuff like that. Now, evidently, they kind of left the end ambiguous. Like, I think at the very end of the 2-hour documentary, they have them coming back to the house. And then Heidi is kind of like, meh, I don't know if that really did any good. But the family's like, yeah, it did, think positive, blah, blah, blah. But then they showed like a shadow in the window, like almost like, it could still be going on. Now, evidently, from what I've read about the family subsequently, apparently they eventually did move out of that house. Now, Heidi grew up and married and had kids and had a normal life and stuff like that. In the house they moved to later, I think there was some poltergeist type activity where like Heidi got picked up out of her bed and like dangled by her legs and stuff like that. They didn't really mention that on the show. I just saw that on some other thing. So, she went on and grew up and everything like that. But she says that she still sees spirits every now and then. She says she hasn't seen Mr. Gordy for a while, probably since she's been a teenager. I think when she was learning to ride a bike, or she just got a new bike or something like that. And Mr. Gordy was like, hey, I'll help you on your bike. And then that was the last time she ever saw him. So she didn't see him again after that. So I guess he thought she didn't need any further protection.
I think she was definitely a medium.
Yeah, that's kind of what the parapsychologist and the other psychic thought. They said she was just a natural medium, that perhaps it was genetic because evidently Joyce, who was Lisa's sister, Heidi's aunt, she said that their mother had grown up in an even more rural part of Georgia called Haunted Holler.
Yeah.
Or Haunted Hollow.
Haunted Holler.
Haunted Holler.
Haunted Holler.
Or Haunted Hollow for those of you not
Those of you who speak English.
Those of you who speak English.
Yeah.
And evidently it had something to do with the Trail of Tears, and there was a lot of spirits there. You could hear like screaming. There were ghosts like screaming and stuff like that.
Yeah, coming out of a cave.
And evidently the grandmother, and maybe, I don't know, they implied that Lisa had been born with a veil over her face, which is why they called the book The Veil. Because you know how sometimes babies will be born with like a film of skin over their face, and back in Middle Ages and stuff like that, they thought that if you were born with that, then you had second sight.
Okay.
So that's still a very common, particularly in the South, still a very common old wives' tale, if you want to call it that you're born with a veil so you can see the other side or whatever. So evidently the grandmother had been born with that, and the mother and stuff like that. Now, okay, so even though there was this relationship to the Trail of Tears and, the infamous Native American burial grounds, yada, yada.
They're always blaming ghosts on Indians.
I know. I wonder if they get pissed off at that.
Yeah.
It's like, it wasn't us, okay? Yeah. Every ghost isn't us.
Leave those Indians alone.
For real. They're like, we didn't do it, white people. Just leave us alone. God. Kids, just keep your ghost to yourself.
Well, they died. Well, everybody died.
Yeah.
There have been dead people on every square foot of America.
Yeah, you'd think you wouldn't even be able to move. You'd be like elbowing ghosts out of the way every time you were walking.
Only Indians have spirits? Is that what they're saying?
I guess
no white ghosts?
We don't have souls.
Yeah, white people don't have souls.
Just like redheaded people.
Shit, there was that one episode where, one haunting episode where that black guy, that ghost of that black guy was going in there. Remember that? This is my house.
Yeah, I remember that.
That would scare the shit out of me.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, any ghost doing that would scare the shit out of me.
This is my house.
And the actor that they had to play him was like really spooky. He did a good job. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, they actually made a Hollywood movie about this case. And even though, this Snedeker case was The Haunting in Connecticut, which was actually kind of a big hit. And then they made the sequel, which was called The Haunting in Connecticut, Ghosts of Georgia. Yeah. Because Connecticut, Georgia, what's the difference?
Whatever.
Colons, whatever. Has something to do with a colon. That's all I say. Okay, so the weird thing about the movie, and I saw it on cable. I don't even know if it was released in the theaters or if it was just like a direct to Netflix kind of deal. I saw it. It's not terrible, but it wasn't all that great. And they really took some liberties with the case. I mean, the families, their names were the same. They had a thing with Mr. Gordy and stuff like that. But for a long time, they kind of made you think that Mr. Gordy was a bad guy. Like he'd been a slave master or something. I can't remember all the details exactly.
Mr. Gordy didn't even live during those times.
Well, yeah, and that's what's dumb is just like, and I'm like, Mr. Gordy was a real guy, and he probably still has relatives that are alive, and they're just like, hey, fuck you. I mean, well, I was thinking that when I was watching it. Now, at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, you find out that Mr. Gordy was actually the good guy all along, and blah, blah, blah. Like, he wasn't, but for a long time in the movie, you think it's a bad guy. Okay. Even though the kid is saying it's not a bad guy, the mom is like, it's a total bad guy, he was a slave master or whatever. But there was all this stuff about the Underground Railroad, and all these, like, slaves in the woods that were, like, stuffed and made into mannequins, or I don't remember what it was. Or no, it was not a ventriloquist. Why would I say a ventriloquist? A taxidermist. Okay, yeah. Why did I say ventriloquist instead of taxidermist? A taxidermist who somehow wanted to make slaves into taxidermy trophies.
Damn.
I don't know why. Just because
it would look good in the movies.
Yeah.
Scare the shit out of you.
So obviously that had nothing to do with the case. It was nothing to do with slavery. It was nothing to do with anything as far as I know. So, the movie, it's an okay movie, but it's not.
Although that one episode with that black ghost, man, that did have something to do with slavery. We got to do a show on that too.
I can't remember what the name of that one was.
Yeah, evidently he became a freed slave, and the slave owner or the
because the ghosts were him and the slave. Yeah, that's
gave him the property.
That's right.
But then,
I remember that one.
Because, evidently the master thought he was the rightful heir, this guy. And then the extended family came back and took it away from him.
That's right.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And then later on in modern era, people were buying this property and they were seeing the images of this black ghost in a big old hat, like a big cowboy hat, bearing down on them while they were asleep. This is my house! This is my house! Boy, that would scare the shit out of me.
I know, I can't remember what that. I don't know if that's one of the ones that we have because I don't remember seeing it recently.
I don't think we have that one.
Okay, so it must have been later. It must have been later than season 6.
We need to get some of the other seasons.
Yeah, because I think we have.
I'll buy. I think the last season I have is season 6. Or is it season 7?
Well, no, because I got you a box set, and that has 1 through 4. Yeah. And then I got you 5 and 6 separately, because I don't think they sell them in box sets anymore. Or they didn't when I was looking for those.
Yeah, well, I'll have to buy the newer ones.
Because I think they cram them all on one disc now.
Every now and then they'll come up with a real good one. And that
I mean,
was one of the ones
I think we've seen all of them except for maybe the super most recent ones, but
yeah, I think it's still running.
Yeah, as far as I know, because there was a big gap of like several years,
right? Yeah,
and then they were taken over by someone else, and they started making them again, like after Destination.
Yeah, I got to
after they moved to Destination.
I got to get
America.
the new ones.
Yeah, we should probably get the new ones because I remember some of them being pretty decent.
Yeah.
But anyway, oh my gosh. Okay, so we're at the end of the show, so I guess we will wrap this up. We pretty much got to the end of it anyway.
Yeah, is there anything to this case? I think so.
Probably. It just seems like too much of a... I mean, they didn't super exaggerate a lot of stuff. There wasn't like a lot of poltergeist activity or anything like that going on.
You had a good parapsychologist involved. You had a lot of witnesses. The claims are not real outlandish when you really get down to them.
Not really.
They brought a psychic in on the case that... I usually don't like to bring in psychics on a case because they tend to muddy the waters, but she didn't say anything that was too...
She didn't say anything crazy or stupid or anything.
Right, but something happened.
Yeah, probably.
Probably something happened.
I would think.
I think the most compelling part of the story is that she could pick Mr. Gordy up out of a lineup. She identified Lon as Mr. Khan, knew where the grave was even before she could read. I think those were some of the strongest points of the case.
Yeah, because that's pretty weird.
And then
if it went down the way they said it did, then that's pretty
consistent, weird. That's pretty kind of hard evidence. If it really happened, I'm not there. They're saying that happened.
Like I said, it's as with everything. You're kind of like one person removed.
You're one person removed. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. You say that, okay.
And like you said, they're not saying anything crazy that happened.
It's not outlandish enough. And also, here's another thing. There is no cohesive plot to this.
Yeah.
And because there's no cohesive plot and there's no motive, to the story, I tend to believe it because I think that the real cases tend to be kind of random. Yeah. Random and vague.
That's why, and
mixture of phenomena just happening.
Like I said, and it did seem like that too. Like when I was researching the Unseen Hand, it seemed like a lot of the cases that seemed like they probably happened the way the witnesses said, there was no story to it. There was no 3-act plot. It was just random shit that didn't mean anything.
Right.
And it didn't happen in any particular pattern.
Didn't have anything to do with land deeds, didn't have anything to do with vengeance from the grave or any of the other compelling plot devices that drive a ghost story.
Yeah, which I can see why they do that for the movies because, it's a movie and it's supposed to be exciting and stuff like that. Yeah. And a lot of times real, quote unquote, real paranormal cases don't really lend themselves to that type of plot structure. For
years after the poltergeist episode that my family went through, I asked myself over and over again, why did that happen? What did that mean? Who was that?
Yeah.
It was never really answered.
Yeah, it's kind of a pointless question.
It's a pointless question. You'll never figure it out.
Yeah, I don't think it's any intelligence causing it.
Not really. Not in the traditional sense of the word.
Yeah.
No, I think it's right hemisphere brain activity linked with psychic abilities. And mediumistic abilities, possibly.
So you're almost getting kind of a weird, vague, dreamlike sort of logic.
Recurrent, spontaneous psychokinesis. It's emotionally driven, not logically driven, and not driven by a story, by a horror narrative out of a book. It's not like that.
Yeah.
It's just you're feeling bad and bad shit happens. You're feeling tense, things move.
Yeah.
It's just that.
And like I said, it just seems like
deeper meaning
seems like a similar kind of thing here. It just seems like a case of family members that seem particularly sensitive to the past in a particular area, and were either creating these apparitions or were seeing them in their mind's eye.
When it was happening to me, if I was a kid, if somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, touch this object. Do you know where this came from?" Maybe I could say, "Yeah, I might have been able to answer. Yeah, I know where this has been." No one ever came at me with those kind of tasks.
Yeah, because
evidently they came at. In the Enfield case, they came at Janet with a spoon, and she bent it by looking at it. She didn't even have to rub it. So,
like Uri Geller.
a lot of times when you have a kid who's going through this, they can do things that they haven't even imagined. Probably a good idea to go in there and challenge them. Where is your sister right now? And she might be able to tell you.
Yeah, so you can just see what the parameters of the abilities are.
Yeah, right.
That might be an interesting thing to investigate.
Right. You could put a piece of paper inside of a plastic box and says, "Well, can you make that catch on fire? Or can the ghost make that catch on fire?"
Yeah.
And see if they, if pyrokinesis happens.
Yeah.
I bet you it would.
I think we're going to do a show on pyrokinesis in a few episodes. Because someone recommended we do Connecticut, that town in Italy where fire started everywhere. And I actually put it in my book and I said, we should probably do a show about that because that's kind of that's a really weird thing that happened.
Pyrokinesis is modified telekinesis. It's the same thing. You're just moving molecules.
Yeah, same. That's kind of how I feel about it too. Okay. Anyway, so we've reached the end of the show. Hope you enjoyed our, again, a rambling discussion of a haunting episode. In this case, the pilot episode, the famous Mr. Gordy.
And me being a mush mouth.
And no, you're fine.
Okay.
As always, if you like the show, please like us on Facebook. Please share the show on all your social media. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And please give us a follow on Twitter also. Also, if you didn't notice, we did another movie review, Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah. And we passed 1,000 subs.
We did. We forgot to mention that.
Forgot to mention
that.
that.
So woohoo. Thanks, everybody.
Show seems to be getting bigger.
Yeah. And we hope to be able to keep doing it as long as we're able to do it.
Yeah.
Also,
as long as there's demand and as long as there's support, we'll continue doing it.
Yeah, as long as everyone's not sick of us. Even if they are sick of us, I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway. But yeah, so also, if you would like to support the show, remember to visit our Patreon page, patreon.com/13o'clockpodcast. Or if you would rather make a one-time contribution, then you can go to our blog, which is, like I said, 13o'clockpodcast.wordpress.com or something like that.
Like, share, subscribe.
Yeah, I said that already.
Okay.
And also check, I'm going to say it again. Also check out Zazzle.com/13o'clock, where we have some shirts. And don't forget, if you want to contribute a scary personal experience or scary personal story to our Halloween episode, and we might feature it on there, then please contact me on Facebook and I'll give you the email address, or it will be in the description. It's gravecake@gmail.com. Just send me one, and if we pick it, we will read it or summarize it on the air. And also next week's show, I think I'm going to on the YouTube video, I'm going to premiere the little commercial I made for my new true crime book. So so have a look out for that. It should be on next week's episode. We'll see how it goes. And other than that, that'll do it for episode 59. See you next Tuesday.
I just want